straight, left. No. Right. Good driving, Hank.
Pay attention to the road!
Oh, I'm sorry.
Pixar movies are considered to be some of the highest quality blockbuster animated movies to ever exist. But what is the ultimate Pixar movie? Introducing the Ultimate Pixar Tier List. For the next film in the Ultimate Pixar Tier List, we come to no other film than Finding Dory. This sequel to Finding Nemo, all these years later, follows Dory, following in the footsteps of Monsters University and turning a once side character into the film's main protagonist. Finding Dory isn't about finding Dory, but rather Dory finding her parents. You could try to say it's about Dory finding herself, but it isn't really even that. Regardless, does Finding Dory do enough to warrant its existence, or does it feel like it lacks any real substance? Hot take of the day, Finding Dory is fine. I almost feel like I don't have much to say about this film, which I will actually talk about at the end if that's a good thing or a bad thing and why I'm leaning towards bad, but we'll get to that when we get to that. Regardless of that, Finding Dory, what does it do? Well, it takes Dory, a once side character, turning her into the main protagonist, telling her story. But unlike Monsters University, which is a Pixar film that does that same thing, this film is not a prequel, but a sequel. And I think this film does a few kind of cool things, but also makes a couple missteps that makes me really question why the film makes certain decisions. Let's start with the characters, because I think that's one of the biggest, strongest point of Finding Nemo, especially the main sort of cast, if you will. The main characters, outside of the side characters, or the side characters in the film are good. I'm not going to get too much into the themes of Finding Dory, because even in Finding Nemo, I think didn't have these greatly profound themes that other old Pixar films had. And that's alright. I appreciate Finding Nemo for what it is. And I think it's a great film that tells a great story, but again, has less thematic oomph, but more character moments and character arcs. And Finding Dory is this kind of the same thing, although I think those character arcs are less profound and less interesting. Seeing Marlin having to, let go of his attachment to his son by doing the same to Dory is an interesting twist in Finding Nemo. But Finding Dory doesn't really have that, interesting character hook in Dory. And going into this film, I was concerned because one of my main problems with this cast of characters in Finding Nemo mostly had to do with with Dory herself in the first couple acts. I think she had a great third act, but in the first and second act, she's a hit or miss character that can sometimes do a really good job of foiling Marlin, but also sometimes just feel way too annoying and unnecessarily, laughable. Like the punchline, I don't know, she really felt like she got her serious moment until the end, and I think it really paid off, so I'll give the film that credit. This film, however, I actually my concerns were relieved. I actually think Dory is the strongest character in this film, and she's actually pretty interesting, and I think her journey as a whole is, it's okay. It's nothing crazy or thematically profound. It's not like she goes through this amazing character arc that's a fantastic character study, but no, it's just about her regaining her memories and, dealing with her disability, and that's really what Finding Nemo was about too, not holding people back for their disabilities, but letting them flourish. And I think this film does the same thing with Dory, even though it kind of did that Finding Nemo as well, which, makes this film not completely necessary as a sequel. But what movie is really necessary of a sequel? What sequels are really necessary, unless, I guess, the previous film calls for it? Very few these days. Aside of all that, Dory is a strong character for the most part. The writing really doesn't do her any favors, as we'll get to in a second, but the character herself is a decent protagonist. It's the side characters where I go, oh geez, I have a bit of problems with. The new side characters are fine. You have like the two whales that also sort of have disabilities. One can't see and one also can't see. Well, one can't see with their eyes, and one can't use the echolocation, although they end up, I guess, doing that. And I think the octopus, whose name is escaping me right now, Hank, is actually probably the best new character. He's pretty cool to watch. I think he doesn't have this great character arc, but he does a good job foiling Dory, and I'm glad they decided to go with Hank rather than go with Marlin and Dory again. Like, kind of give a new straight man. Because he's way more interesting and dynamic, and you can a lot more animation stuff you can do with him. But also, just generally speaking, it would have really felt like we were retreading new ground. So I'm happy they did that. Speaking of Marlin and I guess Nemo, that's my biggest problem with the characters, are those two. I kind of wish that they maybe had, when those two get separated at the aquarium, when Dory goes in the aquarium and the two are outside, like, oh shit, she's in there, how are we gonna get in there? They kind of just left him there. It just didn't come back to them till the end, because their whole character arcs for me are non-existent. And now I know we explored them in the first film. Like, this isn't about them. So why do they have so much goddamn screen time? Honestly, Nemo has no character moments and has has no character traits and has like one actual character moment. And it's just like all he does is have a moment where he's like, you yelled at Dory and said, all she's good for is forgetting. And he kind of had you shouldn't have done that, and I feel bad for Dory. That's like his biggest character moment. And they almost missed the opportunity. Like, how did the writers not think like that he should spend that and say, yeah, the way you treated Dory and said that that's what she's good for is like if someone told me if all I'm good for is my fin. Like, you can see why it's fucked up, can't you? And it'd be a very emotional moment between Nemo and Marlin. And they set it up. They fucking pulled the arrow and bow, and they went whoops, and they fucking missed the goddamn target. Yeah, I do not like them at all in this film. I think that they really add nothing interesting. Marlin just kind of reverts back to his old ways, and I feel like it's only at the end, the ending scene with him and Dory, where he really feels like he has a character moment. But throughout the film, he really is, I think, just super not, like, he's not fun to watch. He's just the most, like, he's just a shitty character. He's just not interesting. He's kind of an asshole. Like, I don't really, like, understand why they even emphasize him this much in the film. I think this really could have been Dory's own film, and it would have actually benefited greatly from that. Outside of its characters, one of the big problems I have with this film is its writing. Now, I wouldn't say the writing is awful. God, what is this script? But it is very, very formulaic. Like, a lot of writing tropes, a lot of, coincidences leading the plot. That's been a kind of thing of Pixar films. And yeah, I'm not a huge fan of it. My big other problem is with the writing is they do this thing with the flashbacks where Dory has these flashbacks throughout the film where she's remembering things, and they just happen at the most convenient time. Like, someone will be like, yeah, and that's when I said, how you doing, champ? And she'll be like, phew, and I'd be like, wait, so no, like, oh, it was those words that set her off? Like, no one else said to the Dory, how you doing, champ? Or like, someone will be like, yeah, you need to go to this exhibit or something. Like, you know what I mean? Like, the flashbacks just felt very non-organic. Or even another example, I got a good one. Last one would be like if someone came up to Dory and said, hey Dory, how you feeling? And she went, feeling? For like flashback. It was like, dude, like, I can't think of specific examples, but they were things that she would absolutely hear in a regular day or regular, like, day-to-day interactions and conversations. But regardless of that, they come at super convenient times to move the plot along and guide where it needs to go. And it's just really shitty writing. I just don't like that at all. And it really bogs the film down. Even if the flashbacks are fun at times, but even then, they're not even really worth it. They kind of really feel like they just exist just to move the plot along. So yeah, the writing in that way is definitely probably the weakest part of this film. That's writing and its side characters, I think, are at least two of them, or most of them. I'd say generally speaking, just lump them together, because the Hank's good, but the rest of them are okay to not great. So I'm gonna say overall that the weakest part of the film, it would be for me, the side characters and the writing. And the film doesn't really have that much thematic weight to it, but I will say, goddamn, is the animation incredible. I praised Finding Nemo for having an incredible animation that aged probably the best of any Pixar film. I think it's safe to say. Still to this day, it wows me. And Finding Dory sits right along with that. It competes with it. It obviously is newer, so from a technical aspect, it's better. Although I think I have a little bit more appreciation for the for the Finding Nemo animation, because I think it uses colors a little bit better than this film does. The aquarium has, I like the colors in the beginning. There are some very grays and dark moments under the sea, like there was in the first film. But overall, the colors pop out to me way more. I can see the pinks and the reds and obviously the blues in Finding Nemo. The aquarium really, I feel like lacks a little bit depth in its colors and its animation. But still, like when it comes to like animating water and fish and all that, it's great. Fantastic. Love the art direction, love the film. Just wish they used colors a little bit more, but still overall art direction, 2 thumbs up. Like it a lot. But speaking of setting, I actually think the aquarium is a really interesting setting. I like the little set pieces they have, whether it be, in the whale's tank or even like going like behind the scenes, like the offices and like the backstage of the aquarium. That's super interesting. I really like that. Also like the touch pool or like, the big sea tank that you see in every aquarium. You can clearly tell that the cast of this film went to an aquarium, maybe 1 or 2 or multiple, to kind of like went in the back offices and stuff, because this feels very real and it feels very authentic. So they did a good job nailing the setting. I think maybe like, outside of it, just really, this film really is just that one set piece, and that does, I think, really make the scope of the film feel a little bit less grand. I know Finding Nemo is this grand adventure of finding Nemo going across the ocean. This film is way more self-contained, and it makes sense because it is a little bit more of a self-contained plot. But I kind of wish that they explored that self-containment a little bit. Maybe explored Dory's character a little bit more. They do a decent job with it. I just wish they went a little bit further, especially with the setting. I think they could have done that if they cut out the Nemo and Marlin stuff and really maybe added a couple of more moments with her. But again, I think her whole character is fine, and having her use her disability and overcoming that. But again, the writing just really doesn't do a good job of servicing that character arc. Character alone is great. Or good, I would say. I wouldn't say great. Character arc is good, decent, but the writing really doesn't lift that up at all. Neither does it really, I think, explore the scope this film could have, being such a less grand film than Finding Nemo, which I'm totally fine with. But I think, Finding Nemo did such a good job at that this film really almost feels like it lacks something when it doesn't have that big scope. Even though it tries to at the end with the truck whole scene, which doesn't work for me personally. I think generally speaking, this film is like, its humor is, it's a moderately funny film. Like, I feel like at points the humor lands. It goes for a very like snap joke, like here's a joke, move along, with like set pieces and bits. I think its visual humor is pretty good in that, but I feel like a lot of its written and dialogue humor can feel a little bit forced. Sometimes it feels like they stop. You can see where they're telling a joke. Like it's like, hey, this ugly looking seal can't sit on the rock, and they do that joke again and again and again and again, and it feels like the film stops to do the same joke again and again and again, and be like, hey, look, we're doing this joke again. It's coming. Like you know the joke is coming. Like here it is. And it does. If it did that for 1 or 2 jokes, that'd be fine. But it does it quite a bit in this film for jokes that come back, and sometimes one-off jokes. Like sometimes it really halts in its tracks to be like, here is your regularly scheduled joke. Is this thing on? Like I'm not a huge fan of that, but I think its humor, it's not an unfunny film, but it does that a little bit too much for me. But it does have its visual moments. There were moments where I did genuinely like laugh out loud. I can think of a few in my head where I genuinely was like, that is fucking very, very humorous, very funny. I don't know why I can't think of any top of my head. Now I'm like second guessing myself. But no, this film overall, it's humor, hit or miss, I would say, very hit or miss. Yeah, there's not a lot of thematic depth and enrichment here to talk about. Like, I just feel like that this film is a very fine film, which you may say, like, that's cool. That's a very fine film. Whatever. You watch, it's a film that you watch and go, aha, I have taken everything from this film and I really never plan to watch it again. Which, for some people may be what they want, but for me, it's a bit disappointing in that way, because I just, Finding Nemo is such a great film. It warrants itself being watched again and warrants itself being explored. This film does not. And that's really my big problem with Pixar at this point. Now, I will admit, I did like Finding Dory more than I thought I did. I actually thought it was going to be a bad film. I thought I wouldn't like it because admittedly, I tried to watch this film when it first came out, and I watched the first like 15, 20, 30-ish minutes, somewhere around there. I don't remember exactly where it was, and I just was like not interested and turned it off. But this time I sat down, watched the entire thing, and I can say it was, it's better than I thought it was. But because of Pixar's track record recently, coming off The Good Dinosaur, we watched Cars 2 and Brave and Monsters University, I really had low expectations. And especially with outside of Toy Story 2 and 3, the Pixar sequels and prequels being pretty underwhelming. This is not necessarily underwhelming, but it's sure and overwhelmingly good. It just is. It just is. Which I will say is better than Pixar's track record previous, but it really feels like that this film could have been something interesting. But also, Finding Nemo didn't really warrant a sequel. I didn't really warrant one like Toy Story did. And I guess not that early Pixar films don't, which is why I think Monsters University doesn't work, even though it's a prequel. Like, it just feels like these original stories told the story it was going to tell. Now, doing a spin-off is fine, and that's what this movie is more than a sequel. It's a spin-off. It really doesn't continue the story told in the first one, just occasionally references and points back at it, and they always go like, hey, remember when we did this in the first film? It's a spin-off film. It's a spin-off film with Dory, and I'm fine with that. I just wish it could have been a little bit more, been a little bit more fine-tuned, had a little bit better writing, and just hit a little bit more on all cylinders. It definitely seems to be missing something that Finding Nemo had. Even if, all in all, it's not a bad film. It's just a fine film that I watched, very inoffensive. There were some parts I thought were good, some parts I thought were bad. Overall, I watched it and went, yeah, this is sure a film that came out, and I am watching it. Which, for maybe something like Illumination standards would be good. But for Pixar standards, it's a bit disappointing. Especially having the Finding Nemo brand associated with it. But what are you going to do but rank it? And where am I going to rank it? Well, Finding Dory is a fine film. While it seems to have a lot of writing tropes dominate the script, it is really one of the most inoffensive films I have ever seen. Dory does a much better job taking a main role, and she makes for a pretty decent protagonist. It's the side characters, particularly Marlin and Nemo, that hold this film down. The new side characters are alright, but much weaker than Finding Nemo's cast of fish. The film has its moments, and it's heartfelt at times, but lacks any thematic punch. However, the animation is stellar. Finding Nemo's animation has aged extremely well, and this film, despite being much newer, competes with that film's amazing art direction. The aquarium is also a fun setting, and its set pieces are fun, but it lacks the grand scope and excitement of the first film. The story is a bit more introspective, and the setting matches that, but not nearly as much as it could have. The flashbacks popping up at the most convenient times prove this film has subpar writing. The film is moderately funny, but at points it feels like the film pauses in its tracks to tell a joke, only occasionally nailing the quick and snappy humor it is going for. However, I would be lying if I said there weren't a few moments that genuinely made me laugh. Finding Dory places right into a C rank. It truly is one of Pixar's most average films. It was just fine. I never planned to see it again, which I suppose is a shame since Finding Nemo is such a banger of a film. But again, it really is just fine. So there we go, another film down, another film looking forward. Granted, it's probably going to be a while before my next video and before we watch our next film, because I have a few things I'm doing on stream, including next Saturday evening I'll be busy, and I got some streams to prep and some projects, big projects I'm working on, but I do plan to come back probably by the end of October with watching our next film being no other than Cars 3. Fuck. Already? Oh, I feel like we just saw Cars 2. Oh my god. Alright, Cars 3. I have never seen Cars 3 before. I have seen Cars 1 and 2. Y'all know what I think of those films. I do not like them. So, I don't want to have the mindset of I'm going to dislike Cars 3, but a part of me is like, I think I have low expectations going. And I have low expectations going in. Now, that does not mean if the film is just semi-bad and not really bad that I'm going to put it high. It just, we'll see where it places. I am interested to see this one because I hear nobody talk about this one. I mean, nobody talks about this one. I hear people talk about the first one and the second one, and I hear nothing about the third one. That could be me just avoiding hearing from it because I've never seen the film, and I genuinely do that with films I have not seen. But I don't know what to think. I'm going back to Carville. We are watching the film the day this video comes out, so definitely come to my Twitch channel and watch it with me. But the video on it, and when we watch the film after that, that won't be until the end of October. And it actually works out because the film that we'll be watching at the end of October will be no other than Coco. So kind of appropriate to watch at the end of Halloween, or the end of October before Halloween. Regardless of that, though, although I guess it should be November 1st. Huh? Whatever. Is that that's an oh well okay whatever. Regardless of that, I'm getting too far ahead. Cars 3, vroom vroom. Here we go. Beep beep.